Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron. Bit of a different video today. Like always, when a ban list is updated, I immediately rush to YouTube to give you my steaming hot take, and today is no different. As always, these videos in particular are not scripted, not rehearsed, they're really bad, but I gotta get them out so I can get that YouTube ad money. So I'm gonna talk about a couple of things today. I'm gonna explain the changes, talk about a little bit of design philosophy from Konami based on this list, how I feel about the changes, and what this means for the metagame, which will likely be the longest portion of the video. This, of course, is not a blind reaction. I did know these changes. In fact, I knew them several weeks before everyone else, because part of the Rothschild New World Order scheme is to influence the Konami ban list, so I hope you like what we've cooked up for you at NWO headquarters. So let's start with changes. First, we have Banned, Gofu the Vague Shadow, Dandelion, Double Iris Magician, Level Eater, Maxi, and Perform Pal Skullcrobat Joker. Now, some of these were at 3, some were at 1, but they are now all at 0. Speaking of things at 1, we have a lot of changes to the limited list as well. Apoclephort Towers moves from 0 to 1, Grinder Golem moves from 3 to 1, Perform Age Damage Juggler moves from 0 to 1, Monster Reborn from 0 to 1, Spiral Resort from 3 to 1, and Solemn Judgment from 0 to 1. We also have an addition to the extra deck. Firewall Dragon has moved from 3 to 1, I believe making it the first ace to have been touched in any way on the ban list. There are no changes to the semi-limited list. I think Konami's kind of recognizing the unimportance of that list, but there was a lot moved from the semi-limited list and the limited list to the unlimited list, starting with Artifact Morale Tech, which is now at 3, Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning, which is now at 3, Card Trooper, which is now at 3, Thunder King Ryo at 3, Brain Control, of course, errated at 3, El Shadal Fusion at 3, Future Fusion similarly errated at 3, Mind Control to 3, Prep to 3, Sacrifice to 3, Bottomless to 3, Ceasefire, Ojamatrio, and Torrential all to 3, alongside Brionac, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, finally free from prison. So this signals a pretty big change in Konami's design philosophy. It's clear that TCG and OCG now have two completely different ideas about what the ban list should do. The OCG approach, and previous TCG formats as well, has been that the community finds something that's broken, it's broken on release, it's released, then we suffer through like a really bad format for about 2 months, after which a ban list is released that solves the problem, and we sit in this weird sloppy format where no one can figure out the best deck and it's all super diverse for like a month, and then the next broken thing is released. Now, this specific ban list signals a complete detachment from that line of thinking because it addresses things that were expected to be very good decks in the future before they were released. Things like Grinder Golem, we don't have to sit through a Grinder Golem format. Things like Double Iris, we don't have to sit through an Electromite format. There's just a lot on here to be happy about if you value deck diversity. Alright, time for the long part of the video, as we would say on 10-minute testing. Get ready for the card by card. First, the ban list. Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow. Whew! Could not have come early enough. I am really happy that this guy is gone. Obviously, it was banned because Blackwings featuring Crystron Needle Fiber were just a little too powerful. You can search Gofu, I mean... No, in reality, just a very strong generic link tool that almost every deck could play, and nothing this card has ever done has ever been fair. I mean, last format it was being used to, make Ultimaya Zolkin, a card that for its entire lifespan never did what it was expected to do, and now is gone. Just the story of almost everything on the ban list. Dandelion was banned for very similar reasons. I think Konami realized you could MacGyver your way into, like, a Blackwing Gofu that used your normal summon by normal summoning like Mathematician and sending this guy. More importantly, you can get it off like Lone Fire Blossom and go into big link boards, and then get more tokens and go into bigger link boards. Like, things that make tokens just sort of have a target on their heads right now, especially ones that, like, make Foolish Burial a link to. Iris Magician, pretty spooky to see this guy go. This is really Konami being proactive about the ban list. You know, we expected Electromite Magicians to be the best deck for an extended period of time until something was done. This is the something that would inevitably be done. Iris Magician, of course, in Electromite is able to get its effect on the first turn despite the fact that there's no battle phase because you can pop it with Electromite and then go nuts. Happy to see it go. People talk about, oh, Pendulums was a tier 2 deck, why would you nerf a tier 2 deck? Come on. Don't pretend these cards don't exist in the context of future releases. Like, Pendulum was not going to be a tier 2 deck with the current ban list plus Electromite. It was going to be the best deck, if not the second best deck. Worth also noting that, like, right now the best deck in a world where we didn't have the Pendulum nerfs, people would say would be Trickstar, but Trickstar doesn't have a particularly good Pendulum matchup. It's fine, but it's not great. That probably would inevitably end with Pendulum being the best deck, despite being, like, the third best deck now. I'm done talking meta. Level Eater. Whew. I mean, raise your hand if you didn't see this coming. The OCG never had a format where they got to sort of gather data on how Level Eater interacts with links. We, of course, were about to, and preliminary testing showed that it was going to be real strong. You know, if you want to check the intricacies of the 200 IQ necessary to play a Level Eater Link deck, check out the Blue Eyes one on my channel, the Dark Lord one on my channel. They both make the same degenerate bullshit board that just stonewalls everything. I'm very happy that this card never saw the light of day with links, and very happy we don't have to suffer through that format. Max C, this probably should have gone a couple of formats ago, but I'm happy to see it go now. Konami, I think, is trying to distance itself from hand traps that say end the turn. You know, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is strong, but very rarely does it end the turn. Usually it ends one of several searching tools that your opponent's deck has. The new hand trap Yakashi Warashi is very targeted towards the graveyard. You know, it only really does a certain amount of things. It doesn't ever really end the turn. And of course, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit has been declining in playability ever since things started floating again. So, truthfully, I think the only hand trap left that really ends the turn now the Maxi is banned is Droll and Lockbird, and I think that's kind of on the short list for things that might be banned in the future, since Reincarnation and it interacts so interestingly. But of course, Droll and Lock is always, always, always a product of its format. So if we enter a format where, like, Lightsworn is really good and Droll and Lock is really bad, then, you know, I don't think we really would have anything to worry about hand trap-wise anyway. The last banned card is Perform Pal Skullcrobat Joker. This was a little bit of a shock. I didn't expect to see it, but I'm a little happy that it did happen. Of course, it usually required your normal summon and added, like, a one of whatever you were missing to your hand. Really powerful search tool in a deck already full of powerful search tools. You know, the Pendulum Magician decks and the Odd Eyes decks will still be able to find the card they want. They'll just have to use one of their 17 other cards that do the same thing. This was the most powerful of those cards, so, you know, it had to go. I maybe would have preferred to see it go back to 1 or something, but, you know, 0 is fine too. Limited list. Apically 4 Towers. This is scary. Why would you unban this? I mean, it's not particularly good. Kaijus are everywhere, of course. There's so many main deck outs to it, it hurts, but, you know, really ever incentivizing a build-a-boss style of gameplay leads to some of the worst Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever played if the boss is particularly powerful. This plus a bunch of other Klee unbans are really scary to look at the same time, but I promise you they're not a big deal. The Klee decks that want to play, like, Trip Sacrifice are probably not going to be playing Apically 4 Towers. I don't expect it to be good, and if it is, I will be not only shocked, but probably quit Yu-Gi-Oh! Because Towers Turbo is one of the least fun decks to play against in the history of time. Grinder Golem. Glad this went to 1. More proactivity from Konami. We don't have to suffer through this format. Of course, we never had to because we don't have Security Dragon and couldn't take full advantage of this card. Still, you know, pretty degenerate with, like, Linkaribos and Akashic Magician and things. You can still get it with Magical Contract or if you really, really need it, but I think most people will elect not to at all. Perform Pal Damage Juggler. Perform Age Damage Juggler, rather. It's been so long since I've seen a Perform Age that I forgot what they're called. This card's cool. I'm glad that it's off in some capacity. It's gonna make Trickstar a little worse, unfortunately. I guess, like, Lightsworn will play it. Lightsworn, of course, not really a Lightsworn deck anymore, like Plant, Zombie, make rank 4s, make Curious the deck. We'll probably find room for a larger Perform Age engine now with, like, Hat Triggers alongside the already being played Trick Clown for Brilliant Fusion plays. Monster Reborn. It seems like Konami is of the opinion that they need to slowly unban every recognizable card from the anime. This is scary. It feels a lot like unbanning Sixth Sense. Obviously, it's not that powerful, but I wouldn't be surprised if it lasted exactly one format and left. Spiral Resort. You know, I mean, you knew something was going to happen to Spiral. Going to 1 isn't a huge deal. I mean, it's big, but it isn't the end of the world. Of course, sending Spiral Resort to 1 means that Master Plan gets way, way worse, and it means that the nerfs to Spiral previously, the Drone to 1, the Quick Fix to 1, are now magnified because you can't consistently find them regardless of the fact that you're only playing 1 copy in their deck. It also means that destroying Spiral Resort really screws over your opponent. So now Spiral pilots are going to have to, like, make some pretty tough decisions about, am I playing, like, Sleeper Turbo? Am I playing Master Plan at all, you know? I'm glad that that sort of deck building is being rewarded. I think this is a big enough hit to Spiral that it is no longer the best deck. Judgment, baby. This is, above all things, buff to decks that set back row. Now, back row decks have kind of gotten the short end of the stick recently. I'm talking about anything with Demise, like Barrier Statues, and insert your favorite archetype there, and Paleo specifically. really, really suck against Evenly Matched and Hey True Nade. And, you know, Hey True Nade just came out. We don't know how playable it's going to be. Evenly Matched really screws him over. Solemn Judgment is a hedge against Evenly Matched. It comes at a high cost. It is a reasonable price to pay, but it is something that gives those decks the ability to compete in a format where people are, like, main decking Heavy Storm, effectively. And, of course, Firewall Dragon. I think the first ace to actually go to 1, or be touched at all in the ban list, if I'm not mistaken. People thought Stardust was going to be, but I don't think it ever was. Raise your hand if you've seen a FTK loop in the last year that has not included more than one copy of this card. I mean, it's pretty reasonable that they got rid of it. I'm happy that it is still in the game because I do like it. I think it's a fun effect, but probably not at 3. It only encourages really degenerate shit. Nothing on the semi-limited list, of course. Let's go to the unlimited. First is Artifact Morale Tech. Artifacts are not going to ruin the game by having Morale Tech. Like, the most powerful artifact is Scythe anyway, and the ability to play an artifact engine that isn't just Scythe and a sad, lonely Morale Tech is pretty excellent. Like, now you could potentially play Ignition. Now you could potentially destroy stuff with Morale Tech. Being able to flex a couple copies of this card is really, really cool, and I hope that it encourages the types of back row decks that I really like. After that is Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning. No one's playing him at 2, probably no one will play him at 3, but I think the Lightsworn becomes a little more powerful as a result of this list. The Lightsworn Zombie, Plant, Everything, Grass deck. And in a world where that deck's particularly good, maybe they'll start playing this card. They aren't, despite having the ability to play 2 already, so, you know, I don't know. He'd be good in Duel Links. Card Trooper is back at 3, woo! So you can Troop Dupe Scoop in 2018, That's about all. I mean, the scoop in this scenario refers to yourself. Card Trooper, looking like a battle bot, is not particularly powerful in this day and age. I hope that he finds his way into the, grass decks. Pretty excellent in the mirror if, grass becomes popular enough that you could left arm offering away your whole hand for machine duplication and then be like, machine dupe my Card Trooper, mill 3, mill 3, mill 3, overlay Nadante, mill 3. It was basically grass. Like, that'd be fun, but you know, I don't know how effective it's going to be. It's something that I'm going to be trying to force over the next couple of weeks, but I don't expect it to be, you know, any sort of meta-relevant. Thunder King Ryo, another buff to these, slow demise decks. I love it. This card is fantastic. Like, if you've never played with Thunder King Ryo, slap a couple copies in your side deck and see what happens. That passive effect is really, really strong, and a lot of the decks that need the ability to add cards from their deck to their hand without drawing them, like, you know, Trickstar, for example, don't have a monster that can get over a 1900 attack monster. He also has, the Solemn attached to him. Thunder King is a really cool card. I'm happy to see it available at a number where now you can very consistently rely on it. If you're playing a Demise deck, of course, you're probably seeing, the top 10 cards of your deck every game on your first turn anyway. Slapping this sucker down as your single normal summon is pretty choice. Brain Control. This card does nothing. It has been eroded to a point where it does nothing. It has been mind broken. El Shadal Fusion. I mean, as long as we don't have Construct, you can just remove every single Shadal card off of the ban list. I have no problem with it. Once Construct comes back, then we're going to need a talking to. Future Fusion. This is probably a small buff to, Noid. I had a friend, though, who played Noid to an invite at a 9-round regional, and he drew Future Fusion, I think, 10 or 12 times, and got to activate it, once. The card never goes off. I've never seen a card more unfortunately weak to almost every removal spell in the format than Future Fusion. I don't think it's good enough that people are going to be able to consistently play it. If it becomes so, it'll probably be a problem, but I'm not scared. Mind Control. Now, this is a pretty interesting one. I think this card is pretty good. You see it a lot in side decks already. I think you'll start potentially seeing it in main decks, especially for decks that have a really hard time going second. Things like Trickstar that are enabled by this ban list anyway really have an inability to get over large monsters. If you just take that large monster and then unlock the link portion of your deck by virtue of having an extra material, things get a lot better. Prep Right. I think sure it works at Konami. That's the only explanation for this going to 3. Or maybe they want you to play Vendread. Either way, I don't think this is going to break anything. Sacrifice. Klee, man. They're really trying to get me to play Klee Demise. Klee Demise, of course, one of my favorite decks of all time. It was very playable during the BA, Monarch, Pepe, Cosmo format of NAWCQ 2015, I believe. Unfortunately, it kind of, punted the actual tournament alongside Cosmo. It had one copy in the top 32 or top 64 or something. It was nuts. Having said that, I played a lot of the actual tournament and I ground a couple LCQs as well. Not particularly good back then. And it was all Klee. It was a 60% Klee field. People bought into the hype of the first Demise deck. If there's anything that enables that deck, it's probably Sacrifice to 3. Bottomless Trap Hole 2-3. If there's cards that get hit by Bottomless Trap Hole, it'll get a lot better, but right now there's really not. 3 copies of Ceasefire and 3 copies of Ojama Trio to 3. Why are you giving Chain Burn more of a chance to compete? I love Chain Burn. I'm actually pretty happy about this, but I don't think this changes a lot. Of course, Ojama Trio gets a lot worse in a world where you can immediately link the tokens away, and Ceasefire, you know, doesn't care that you have Ojama tokens on your side of the field because it really only counts effect monsters anyway. Torrential to 3 is maybe the secret biggest change in this ban list. Building boards right now aren't resilient to Torrential Tribute. They just aren't. They're like, the boards that you build don't float particularly well. They float to some degree, but otherwise are particularly weak to Torrential. This is another way for, like, trap card decks to get back into the game. I think you'll see a lot of decks that can't get over big things as well playing this card. Like, Torrential Tribute is a strong card, and the reason it wasn't played previously is because you couldn't consistently draw it. Like, being able to bait out all this stuff from your opponent, like, fight a weird counter war, and then, like, end with a 3 or a 4 for 1 off of a Torrential Tribute is just unbelievable. And Brionac, I mean, it's been errata, you know, Old Sworn will play it so that they can, like, plagues out a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, maybe, but I don't see it really in anything else for anything but degenerate things. So let's talk about what this means in the larger context of the metagame. Obviously, it is a huge nerf to Pendies, it is a medium nerf to Spiral, and its impact on Trickstar kind of remains to be seen. Trickstar, of course, is a deck that lives or dies based on the swinginess of its matchups, and if a deck that has a bad matchup versus Spiral and Pendulums, but a good one versus Trickstar, currently unplayable, becomes dominant in the wake of this list, it ends up being a very bad list for Trickstar, despite the fact that they escaped unscathed. With that out of the way, these are the decks I think will be good in the upcoming format. Take this with a grain of salt, because, of course, I am routinely wrong. First is Trickstar. You know, they didn't lose anything. I think Trickstar will be a very powerful option in the upcoming format. It can burn out opponents from unbelievable life totals, even if decks that make big dudes become popular that Trickstar can't attack over. Second is Lightsworn, and you'll see this theme in a lot of these decks. They're decks that are currently playable, but kind of slightly under the necessary threshold for playability to make it into like a top 3 or a consistent top 4 format. Lightsworn, I think, gets the most from Exfo plus this release. They have access to Curious, they have access to a new rank 4 engine with the Performance Damage Juggler, and they have the most available slots in their deck, so they can potentially play things like the Monster Reborn, the Torrential Tribute. They can find room easier than anyone else. When I talk about Lightsworn, of course, I'm talking about the plant, zombie, you know, effectively playing Lightsworns exclusively for Charge of the Light Brigade looking deck. Next is ABC, another deck that was slightly below the necessary power level, and I'll throw True Draco in here as well because routinely they're part of the same deck. ABC specifically gets a lot out of Curious. Previously it was going into Decode Talker in order to make like Lone Fire 1-card combos work. Curious is a lot better, frees up a lot of space for them to do other things, and True Draco is hyper consistent, draws a lot of cards in one turn, and Masterpiece might just be good enough in a world where they don't have to contend with 3 or 4 must kills per turn. Paleo, I think, gets a lot better. One of Paleo's worst matchups was Pendulum Magicians, so seeing it weakened is very good news for the deck. It's also particularly bad against evenly matched, but Solemn Judgment gives them another way to hedge against that. And finally, 3 copies of Torrential Tribute is amazing in a deck that was, at one point in time, this is not a joke, playing Needle Ceiling so that they could wipe their zoo opponent's boards. Now, that was like a year and a half ago, but, you know, you get the picture. And Noid, I think, is potentially quite good. Noid, again, gets 3 Future Fusion, which is a buff in some capacity. They also have 60 cards, so they have the space necessary to include some of these new cards like Monster Reborn, Torrential Tribute. Finally, I think Magicians and Spies are still pretty good. Like, people are sleeping on them, but Magicians still got Electromite. They can still do Astrograph stuff, and Spies can still make Sleeper. I mean, I've only been testing for about a day and a half since the list was released, which is about the maximum I think anyone can tell you they've been testing, and you know, Sleeper Turbo is still reasonable. Decks to look out for, I think Klee obviously is on the tip of everyone's tongue. I don't think the Apically 4 Towers version will be particularly dominant. I do want to try out Demise. I tried it all last night and it was okay, but obviously my build was a little loose. More important than the 3 Sacrifice is the 3 Torrential Tribute, the best card in the deck. The ability of the deck to outgrind its opponents is, you know, almost 100% on getting 2-for-1s on their traps, Pendulum summoning back monsters that they lose as a result of flipping things like Torrential Tribute, and being able to do so 3 times in one game is excellent. Hero, I think, is potentially quite good, if only because of the fact that, you you know, the power level of the format went down. Plays very nicely with Skull Dread, plays okay with Isolde. I know I'm saying that wrong, and truthfully I'm just a really big hero stan, so honestly there's a lot of personal bias here as well. And finally, Chain Burn. There's a couple extra tools for Chain Burn, recently legal, you know. Ojama Trio they felt safe on banning because you could just link into stuff with it, and Ceasefire of course is your Just Desserts copies 4, 5, and 6. You know, it's not a giant buff, but Chain Burn is always on the cusp of playability, so I wouldn't be surprised to see people bringing it at least in a rogue context. So that's all for me. Thank you for stopping by, watching my video, giving me ad revenue, and enabling my poor life decisions. See ya.